Metrobank, the first ever champion of women's and girls cricket, have launched the Metrobank Girls in Cricket Fund with the ECB. The goal? To triple the number of girls cricket teams by 2026. Cricket builds confidence and skills in women and girls. Through the Metrobank Girls in Cricket Fund, Metrobank and the ECB aim to create more opportunities and role models for females in their communities. Help champion the future of girls cricket by visiting metrobankonline.co.uk/cricket. Hello and welcome to the Wisden Women's Cricket Weekly podcast. We've got loads in store for you today. First off, we have a chat with myself, Lauren Winfield-Hill, and her Oval Invincibles teammate and Sri Lanka great, Chamari Athapaththu. Athapaththu is in the UK fresh off winning the Asia Cup final against India, undoubtedly the greatest day in the history of Sri Lankan women's cricket in front of a packed house in Dambulla. After that, I speak to Bangladesh cricket expert Tawhid Qureshi about whether this year's T20 World Cup should still be held in Bangladesh given the current violence in the country and how there are both moral and security questions for boards to answer. First up, let's hear from Lauren and Chamari. Well, we've got a special guest on today's show. Joining me and Lauren is Chamari Athapaththu, fresh from winning the Asia Cup with Sri Lanka. First and most importantly, Chamari, are you looking forward to working with Lauren over the next couple of weeks?
Yeah, definitely. I have good experience with Lauren because we played 2 times. We shared the same dressing room twice. So she's my captain in 2017 and 18 when I was playing for Yorkshire.
Goodness,
so
you done well to remember what years it was.
Yeah. So again, I have to share my experience and knowledge with Lauren. Again, share the same dressing room with all Invincible. That's really good for me.
Well, Oval started pretty well, Lauren. 2 from 2. Another very mature performance from Alice Capsey, marshalling the run chase really well.
Yeah, no, she's just growing each game at the minute, I think. And I think the nice thing is we've set and we've chased, so we've had decent experiences in doing both. But yeah, no, it was another awesome innings. I think she took risk at the right time, and everybody that seemed to come in just sort of jumped on the back of her, which is it's been a really clinical start from us, and it's frightening to think that we get to add this one to our lineup as well in a team that's already travelling pretty good.
It was noticeable that it looked like you guys wanted to get it done with a bit of space and comfort room left spare.
Yeah, I think we've seen a few chases, a few teams on the wrong side of chases where I think in the 100 it can turn very quickly within 5 or 10 balls. We've seen it a lot where you sort of the balls and the runs are the same, and it can very quickly change with a tight couple of sets. So we're sort of trying to be ahead a lot in the chases and just make sure that you sort of, ideally you want to get it done before that last 5, really. Yeah. Because we have seen some games, sort of spin on a knife edge really at the back end.
We talked about it last week, and I'm trying to work out why it is that 100 games feel like they change so quickly. And I wonder do you think that the fact that the score board is literally different to normal, so you don't know exactly where you are compared to every other game of cricket you've played outside the 100. You don't have something telling you require 6.5 runs and over, and it can creep on a team quite quickly, and the rate can just change like that.
Yeah, I think it can be like that. I think it can, obviously a batter can get stuck down one end for a bit longer. The new batter's always on strike and things like that. So there's probably lots of different little reasons, but it certainly does feel like a format of the game that it can change very quickly.
Chamari, on to you. Sri Lanka are Asia Cup winners for the first time. The scenes were incredible in front of 10,000 people at Dambulla. Everyone went crazy. How does it feel a couple of days on?
Actually, it's good feeling for us because the very first time we beat India in Asia Cup final. So absolutely, I'm really happy and proud moment. But we keep it simple. Every time we talk about positive things in our dressing room, our head coach always talk about positive, and even the players and the other support staff, even our baggage boy as well. So we talk about positive things. We execute our right plan, right time. So actually, our batters batted really good. We dropped a couple of catches, but batters done really good job in the final. Yeah.
I just want to talk about that because the shift on it for Sri Lanka in the last couple of years has just been phenomenal. the results that I remember watching you girls here against India, and that's, sort of, you've been on a bit of a run since then. And in terms of the head coach and the impact that he's had and those positive things, how does he shape that? What are some of the things he says, or some of the things you set up in training or in games that's different to how you used to go about things?
Yeah, definitely, because he always talk about positives. Mean sometimes some player can drop catches, but he never talk about that drop catch in the dressing room. He always said, no problem, next ball. And other thing is, if I trying to hit six and got out in the bound line, but he never talk about why you are play that shit shot. But he always said, yeah, no, try again, try tomorrow, you can hit six. Like, so these are the positive things. So the players can play their best cricket because they don't have any fear, because they fearless, they play their natural game in the middle.
Yeah, it's certainly, I guess he's accepting that you're going to get it wrong, but as long as you're doing it in the right manner and is a positive manner, then that's all he's looking for.
Yeah, exactly.
How did it feel though? Because in front of 10,000 people, the celebrations were mad, absolutely mad.
Yeah, I think it's more than 10,000. I feel it's 15,000, 17,000 people. But yeah, because we changed women's cricket in Sri Lanka. Last 18 months, we beat top teams. We beat New Zealand in our home soil. We beat England in their home soil. We beat South Africa, West Indies, Bangladesh. So yeah, the people in Sri Lanka think, oh, now women's cricket in right way. So they come to support our team. So that's really good thing for Sri Lanka women's cricket. So I feel I inspired a lot of youngsters. Now my whole team inspired next generation. These are the positive things in my side. I hope we can build good team in future, because these positive things help to develop women's cricket in Sri Lanka.
Do you think it's helped as well? I know there was a period around that COVID time when your team went a long time without having any international fixtures or touring. Do you think the frequency of how often you've played in the last sort of 12, 15 months has helped you, I guess, build momentum, but also you're consistently competing, aren't you, and playing in against some of the best teams? Do you think that's helped?
Yeah, exactly. Because of the COVID, we didn't play any games. We don't have any international games. We hung about playing cricket. So players work hard in the nets. We analyze a lot of things. We develop our cricket skill, and then the new head coach come to this team. Good environment. So these are the things to develop our cricket. So last 18 months we are playing really good cricket because of our head coach, because of even the SLC restructure our domestic. So we get some good youngsters through the good under-19 team as well.
Yeah, it's certainly been a thing where I think, for a long time there was a lot weighing on your shoulders in terms of you performing. But I think the big thing is now, and that we've seen over the last sort of 12 to 18 months, is that it's a real shared contribution. People are putting their hands up at different times, and it's really exciting. International cricket needs it. You need international cricket to be healthy, and just a little bit in terms of that and bringing the youngsters through. Has anything changed behind the scenes in terms of how you're training or the domestic setup in Sri Lanka that's helped those youngsters come through?
Yeah, definitely. We started school cricket under 17 and under 19. We increased some club cricket. Now 14 clubs playing in Sri Lanka, and we are playing Super 4 tournament, both format 50 and T20. And we've developed under 23 team squad in Sri Lanka. We contracted 60 players under SLC. So we have national 20 contracts, 20 player contract, development another 20, and imagine another 20. So these are the things in the positive way in Sri Lanka. Another thing is we talk about our fitness level a little bit high, because we make a little bit good standard now in fitness level. Fitness is number one in cricket. Cricket fitness is number one. So we increase our fitness level.
You mentioned a lot of changes in the domestic system. How recent are those? Because sometimes those changes can take a long time to actually see the benefits on the pitch. But if you're having those positive performances now, that's really exciting that you're having those performances now and the changes are actually quite recent.
Yeah, actually we changed our domestic structure 2-3 years ago. Now best results is coming, because we can't get instant results. We need time. So last 3 years we sacrificed a lot of things. So now we can get good players from nice structure.
Yeah, no, you can certainly, that timeline makes total sense, doesn't it? I sort of had a little laugh there when you said 2 or 3 years, because it's about right, isn't it? That's the time that it takes to see that come to life, isn't it? And now you're obviously seeing all the positive changes that have been made in Sri Lanka come to life with your performances on the field.
You've been a star player in international cricket for a long time, but in the last 3 or 4 years, your game's gone up to an altogether new level. What do you put that change down? Because your record across both white ball formats have been amazing in the last 4 years.
Yeah, actually, I played a lot of franchise cricket all around the world. So I share my dressing room with the world best cricketers. So I learn a lot of things from them, how they prepare for before the game, how they manage themselves in the game, and how they training in the nets, how they develop their skills, gym sessions, have fitness. So these are the things I learned from franchise. Sometimes some people think franchise cricket all about money, but I don't think like that, because these franchise, I learned a lot of things from franchise. So I'll share same experience with my youngsters as well. So I after 2017 I started playing franchise cricket first time with Lauren in Yorkshire. So yeah, so I learned a lot of things from franchise. These things very useful for my cricket.
What were some of the key things, cricket-wise, batting-wise, I want to know a little bit about, in terms of what are the key things that you think, is it anything to do with how you train now, or how you think in the middle, or what are the key things that you've learned sort of batting-wise that's really clicked for you the last couple of years?
Yeah, basic thing is back to yourself, back into your skills, rather than what bowlers and the opposition fielders and the captains doing. So I always trust my skill and what I can do. And another thing is, if I want to hit big shot, I have power base.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I can't hit. So I do more batting, power hitting things in the net with the coaches, and I develop my power hitting a little bit. And I always think about, I try to hit 6. If I can't hit 6, go for boundary, or then second option, third option. So these are the things I learned from last 1.5 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was going to ask you about franchise cricket because in September last year, when Sri Lanka beat England, you tweeted something quite fun because you didn't have a contract in the 100, the WPL, or the WBBL, and you had a tweet that said, WBBL cross, WPL cross, the 100 cross, player of the series tick, something like that. What was that like when you were one of the best players in international cricket, and you, for that year, when you were right at the top of the game, you weren't getting those contracts?
As a player, I think my international performance is always good, and I was represent my country. My performance is in top level. But when I was playing for franchise cricket, my performance is average. So I changed this pattern because I feel when I was playing for Sri Lanka, I have responsibility. I have to do better. I have to lead from the front. When I was come to franchise cricket, we have a lot of good players, so I don't have any pressure. So without pressure, I can't perform. When I was playing for Sydney Thunder, the head coach Lisa Kirtley said, she asked me, why you are not performing in franchise cricket? I said, I don't know, but when I was playing for Sri Lanka, I have pressure. So she said, okay, we have very young team, so you have to take responsibility. You think like a captain. You played your natural game same like in Sri Lanka. So I think that advice and the thing is important. Change my pattern in franchise cricket. So I just play my natural game in Sydney Thunders. Then I got opportunity playing for franchise cricket around the world. And perform well.
It's a really good, it's an interesting conundrum, isn't it? It's a really interesting one, because I think there is lots of players that can probably relate to that, when it really is all on me. I have to put my hand up here for my team, for Sri Lanka.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you're in a franchise team where actually it's almost like you can pass the buck, someone else will do it, when the mindset is completely different. So I think that's really intriguing just to hear about that. So we've just got to say to you, take responsibility. Don't pass it on to someone else, just take responsibility.
Just finally, with Sri Lanka, you've just beaten India in an Asia Cup final. There's a World Cup in Bangladesh later this year. So in Asian conditions again. You must be really confident going into that tournament.
Yeah, definitely. But the thing is, World Cup is different. Every game is important. Every game is... every day is fresh day, game is fresh, so we have to think fresh mind, because we won Asia Cup is past, so we have to focus on what we can do tomorrow. So exactly, our group is a little bit tight group because Australia,
Mm.
New Zealand, India, and Pakistan.
Mm.
So yeah, we have to execute our right plan, right time. We have to play our best cricket. We have to take one game, one time.
Mm.
Just think one game, one time. So if we can play in our best cricket, we can change history.
How do you find, what will the preparation look like for somewhere like Bangladesh? Obviously, Sri Lanka conditions, we know that it turns and stuff, but Bangladesh is you'll see that more extreme conditions. Is there anything that you and your team are doing sort of uniquely just for Bangladesh?
Yeah, exactly. Last 12 months we preparing good tracks in Sri Lanka for batting because we have to develop our batting lineup. So we preparing flat track for batting. So our batters score more runs, but it's little bit different in Bangladesh because Bangladesh tracks are very slow and low bounce tracks. Even last Asia Cup we played in Shillett, the tracks is very slow and low. But I hope this World Cup they will prepare a little bit good tracks for the batting because a lot of spectators come to see them how batters batting. So yeah, we have good plans for Bangladesh tracks because yeah, we have to adjust the condition. We can't complain all the time. So as a batter, as a captain, we have to adjust the condition, and we have to execute our right plan, right time, in the middle. Yeah.
Well, slow, low pitches, difficult group, lots of opportunities for you to bat under pressure, for you to thrive under.
Yeah, lots of responsibility to take.
Yeah,
You'll be
yeah,
excited about that.
because we have good spin lineup, experienced spinners. So Australia and New Zealand, I know they're a little bit struggle for the spin. Yeah, so this Bangladesh condition is, we know the condition, so I think it's good thing for us. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today, and best of luck, not just in the World Cup, but for the rest of the campaign with Oval as well.
Thank you
Awesome.
so much.
Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Cheers,
Atta.
Chamari. For the upcoming Women's T20 World Cup, Wisden Cricket Monthly have put together an excellent offer for Wisden Women's Cricket Weekly podcast listeners. We've got a brand new monthly subscription offer for you, and you can now subscribe for just £3.67 a month. And to make this even better, if you follow the link and use the code in the description, you can get your first issue of this monthly offer for free. With the offer running until the conclusion of the tournament, there's plenty of time to get involved at the best price possible. In a couple of months' time, the T20 World Cup is supposed to be held in Bangladesh. In the last few weeks, though, the country has seen mass protests against the government. More than 200 protesters have died so far, with groups like Amnesty suggesting that attacks on student protesters have been coordinated by people believed to be members of the Bangladesh Chhatra League, a group affiliated with the ruling Awami League. The government denies any involvement in the violence, but that violence that is still ongoing raises both security and moral concerns over whether or not the tournament should go ahead. Here is Bangladesh cricket expert Tawhid Qureshi on the situation in Bangladesh right now. This year's T20 World Cup is in Bangladesh, and the focus so far has been on what sort of pitches there will be. How do you balance your side for those sort of conditions? But there are much, much bigger questions at play that need addressing. Tawhid, could you explain what's been going on in Bangladesh over the last few weeks? Because it's sort of been in the news, but it's not been front and centre.
Absolutely, yeah. So I guess in a nutshell, what's happened is that the country has experienced probably the worst political violence for several decades. And this has all come about through a student anti-government protest. But I guess to set things in a wider context, the protests, the anti-government protests, were very much part of a symptom of a wider dissatisfaction against the government, against the regime that's been in power for 15 years. During the course of those 15 years, there haven't really been free and fair elections taking place. Increasingly, the government has exercised more and more draconian authoritarian policies. So, for example, I've got journalist friends in Bangladesh. When I speak to them, they say how increasingly difficult it is for them to sort of carry out their jobs. And just generally, there's been a real kind of clamp down on any government opposition over the course of those 15 years. But in terms of what's happened recently, I'd say round about the 19th of July was when things really kind of kicked off, I guess. So the height of the unrest started around then, and it all stemmed, as I say, from this student-led protest. So the protests were essentially against quite an old-fashioned system whereby most government jobs, so civil service jobs, were not most, but a high percentage of those jobs are earmarked for descendants, you got to bear with me here, descendants of the 1971 War of Liberation. So basically, if your father, if your uncle, maybe even your grandfather had some connection to that war, basically, you are guaranteed a job, a government job. And so the protest was against the fact that only a minority of these jobs are merit-based. So in Bangladesh at the moment, as in many countries, I suppose, to get a university education is really quite costly. Families have to sacrifice a lot for their children to go through university. And at the end of it, what you find is that there's a big number of graduates who just can't get access to the sorts of jobs that they would aspire to. So essentially, the protests were against an old-fashioned system that was quite corrupt as well, and the protests were trying to increase the number of jobs that graduates could get on a merit basis. So, on the face of it, quite a logical kind of protest, I guess, from a the point of view of the students. And I guess what happened was that these protests, there were demonstrations, marches, primarily in Dhaka, the capital city, in and around various parts of Dhaka. They gained in popularity to the point where the government had to kind of sit up and take notice. And I guess what the government did was, rather than to kind of reason with any of the sort of student leaders or anything like that, their default kind of position was to try to kind of crush any opposition that there is, which is exactly what they did in regards to these
It's been
protests.
very violent. Latest numbers, we're talking on Tuesday, 30th of July. This morning, 267 protesters have died. There have been several non-protester civilian casualties as well, 20,000 plus injuries. There's an internet blackout. There's a T20 World Cup in 2 months' time, pretty much. The teams will be there in 2 months' time. There are several elements to this. We've just had the Asia Cup where Bangladesh were playing. You wrote a very good piece on your Substack that made the point that commentary around what was going on back home was basically non-existent. So what the players are doing in itself was a remarkable story. On the World Cup, though, there are two elements that I guess are pertinent right now. One, there's a security element. In the recent past, we've seen players from richer boards not fulfill tours in Bangladesh for security reasons. Some England players didn't go in 2016. Australia pulled out their under-19 side for the 2016 under-19 World Cup. Would you say that there are more concerning security questions now than there were on those two occasions? Because we've not seen that much discussion about whether or not the T20 World Cup should be moved on security grounds. Yeah, it's a really good question. I think the threat is different, basically, from what it is now, if you look back to 2016. And I think 2016 is a really good parallel to draw because, as you say, England men's team toured Bangladesh in October of 2016. But that tour was in a huge amount of doubt because, like you say, because of security risks. And so the reason for that, and the timescales are actually very interesting because they almost mirror what's happening at the moment. So in July of 2016, there was a terrorist attack in Dhaka, and it was specifically targeted towards
foreigners, this attack, and indeed I think about 20 foreigners died in that attack. It was an Islamic terrorist attack on a bakery in quite an affluent suburb of Dhaka. So as a result of that there were huge security implications and security fears, which, like you say, famously, Alex Hales and Owen Morgan then decided that those kind of security fears were too great for them to tour. However, what did happen was that, there was roughly 2 months between July and October. So a very similar time scale to what we have now. And in that intervening period, basically the BCB, the Bangladesh Cricket Board, the government went all out to provide, pretty much presidential levels of security to the team. I actually went on that tour in October of 2016, and back then I was probably more of a punter than a pundit. I remember sort of sitting with England fans. There were probably, at the first test in Chittagong, there were probably about a dozen of us sitting in, the best seats, because, we were given the best seats. And, it was quite obvious that there was extra security around. I also remember, interestingly, that representatives from the UK High Commission in Dhaka were actually at the ground kind of constantly, not constantly, but once or twice, they'd come up to us sort of saying, is everything okay? Do you feel safe, etc., etc. So, all the stops were kind of pulled out in 2016 for that tour to go ahead. And indeed it did without any sort of incident.
So from a security point of view, it's a different situation to 2016 in that the 2016 violence was specifically against people who are not from Bangladesh. Different question, though, is morally, do you think teams should be questioning whether they go to Bangladesh? Because this is, from what you describe, in your piece, you wrote that Bangladesh was on the verge of civil war, and this is state-approved violence against civilians. Do you think there's a moral question to be asked of boards that are currently planning on travelling to Bangladesh?
Absolutely, 100%. And yeah, again, it's an interesting question. And, this concept of sports washing is something that we seem to experience with more and more major sporting events. So, you think back to the Football World Cup, the Men's Football World Cup in Qatar, all the questions there around sort of civil rights, or, a country hosting a major sporting tournaments with a dubious record on civil rights. And exactly the same question applies here. Like you say, that the violence or the unrest here is very different to anything else that I can really remember in recent Bangladesh history, in that it was the government killing its own civilians. So as you were saying earlier, there was a shoot to kill order at the height of the unrest. And I think one of the most shocking things for me was also, as you were sort of saying, the indiscriminate nature of the violence. So lots of actually very young people got caught up in the crossfire, I guess. So there were reports of children as young as sort of 7 or 8 years old who ended up losing their lives because of that violence. And so, I think because of just how shocking and brutal the nature of the government clampdown was, I think, any kind of fair-minded person would have to ask questions about, the regime of a country that adopts such tactics. And also, the aftermath is very interesting as well. So as I said, the height of the unrest was probably from around the 19th of July for a few days onwards. As you said, there was a complete internet telecommunications blackout. So it's really worrying for people like me who've got friends and family in Bangladesh, and you're so used to instant WhatsApp messages, when suddenly you don't hear anything for days on end, and you're kind of gleaning information from social media. It's obviously a worrying time, and no doubt even more distressing for civilians in Bangladesh. But what I was going to say was, the aftermath of the unrest is quite interesting, because now what seems to be happening is that the government's kind of waging this information war, if you like, and so they're basically trying to maintain that the protests were infiltrated by third party actors, people with an agenda against the government, so not necessarily just students. And there's a huge kind of push at the moment for the government to kind of get that narrative out there.
If you were part of the England setup, part of the coaching staff or support staff, what would you do? Would you be calling? I think part of the discussion is that this is not something at the forefront of the UK news agenda. So I'm sure if you asked England players and support staff, they would probably be aware of something going on in Bangladesh. They probably don't know the extent at which the government is responsible for it. And I guess part of this discussion is also that the government, you wrote in your piece, that the government have, in the recent past, they like to use cricket in a positive association. They like to take credit for anything that could be associated positively with Bangladesh cricket. If you're a part of the England setup, as someone who knows what's happening there and who's responsible for it, would you be actively calling for England to pull out of the competition?
I guess, again, as you were sort of citing there, there's two elements to it, isn't there? There's the security element and the moral element, or the moral question, if you like. And so on the security front, what I would say is that because of the measures, the severity of the clampdown on the protesters, the government has largely kind of put a lid on things for the time being, I would say, because of the internet blackout, because of all the arrests that they've made. The protesters, or the original student protesters, can no longer organise in the manner that they did at the start of the protest. There are still reports of some kind of sporadic, spontaneous, kind of smaller scale protests even now, but I would say that the clampdown from a week or 10 days ago has essentially kind of put a lid on things, and security. So again, 2 months is a long time. I would expect extra levels of security to be implemented by the BCB, by the government. Having said that, there's no blanket answer, is there? I'm not a security expert. What I would say is the next sort of 2 to 3 weeks are really critical. I would say, if there is another large scale protest or, unrest, then that probably does kind of put pay to things. On the moral side of things, to kind of address that, you're absolutely right. I mean, it's a similar case with lots of South Asian cricket boards where they're strongly aligned to the government that's in power. It's no different with the Bangladesh Cricket Board. A number of the board of directors are serving MPs, for example. So there's a strong alignment with the government there. And yeah, absolutely, they will try to potentially use a World Cup to enhance the country's reputation, to try to show, I guess, that it's kind of business as usual.
What would you do though if you were in England camp? What would you be advising if someone from the England camp said, you know more about the situation in Bangladesh than anyone else in English cricket? What would you say to someone in that situation?
I guess it's a really individual kind of choice at the end of the day that people have to make, the players, the management, supporters have to make. But what I would say is that, I see things through a slightly different prism in terms of, it's quite interesting. I was talking or kind of contacted someone, another sort of freelance journalist recently, about who they were intending, or they were thinking about traveling to Bangladesh to cover the tournament, but then they decided, even before the Troubles, that it was a bit too tricky, that it was a bit too kind of challenging or difficult place to kind of travel to, just as a freelance journalist. And I think a lot of the time that is like the default position for most people. And I don't blame people for that, because, you know, I feel it all stems from perception and preconceptions. And I guess so much of the preconceptions around traveling to Bangladesh is that, you know, well, step back, you know, the wider preconceptions around Bangladesh is that it's a poor country, that it faces lots of natural disasters, that, you know, there's inherent instability within government, etc. So from my point of view, I'm not saying that any of that is untrue. It absolutely is. However, you know, myself having roots in Bangladesh, having probably visited the country, I'm guessing 15 to 20 times through the course of my lifetime, and also having covered cricket out there probably for about the last 6 or 7 years, almost on a yearly basis. You know, my perception of risk, my perception of fear and security once I'm out there is very different. So if, you know, you asked me, you know, would you be prepared to travel to Bangladesh right now in 2 months' time? I would probably say I'm more likely to say yes than no. However, as I was saying, the next 2 to 3 weeks, I think, really are critical in kind of trying to inform more around that decision.
One final thing, this is an interpretation of what's happened, and correct me if I'm wrong. Would it be fair to say that should the World Cup go ahead in Bangladesh, the government responsible for the deaths of these protesters would benefit from it? They want it to happen. They want the World Cup to happen, and they would use it as a good feeling story.
Yeah, I guess, yeah, there's a couple of ways of looking at that, isn't there? Yes, I would say essentially, you know, if that's how anyone would want to spin it, even if there wasn't a, you know, a background of turmoil, you know, that whole idea of soft power, sporting events kind of enhancing a country's sport, soft power is definitely something that's real and tangible. But what I would sort of say is that, you know, I hope to be there as a freelance journalist myself if it all goes ahead. And what I would say is that any foreign media that do end up deciding to go, and I hope people do, is that actually I'd say the responsibility on us to report, you know, what's actually going on is even more important than ever. So from that point of view, yeah, I would say, the media has a really important role to play.
Well, pleasure to have you on the show, and I'm sure we'll hear more from you on this story as the months unfold. We hope to hear from the ECB and or the ICC by next week's show. We hope you enjoyed today's show. We'll be back as always next week. And if you have enjoyed it, give us a 5-star rating on the apps. Tell your friends, pop it in your club WhatsApp groups, etc. It all helps. In collaboration with the ECB, the Metro Bank Girls in Cricket Fund aims to triple girls club cricket teams by 2026. Metro Bank are removing barriers and creating role models to empower women in cricket and in life. Champion the future at metrobankonline.co.uk/cricket.